There is a lot to talk about when we look at handwriting, and when we look at how some professionals work with children to help with their handwriting, we feel there are a lot of fundamentals that get overlooked. So we prepared this webinar to give you a good foundation. And in part one, we're going to look at what happens in the brain that helps you get to the point where you can hold a pencil and write letters clear, legibly. It's important to build skills in the right order. You have to learn to walk before you can run. Actually, did you know you had to learn to walk before you can talk? That one is for another webinar. Part two, why handwriting? Why it's actually worth working on it and getting it right. And three, after working with thousands of people with this program as we have, we've come across some techniques that are better than others, and we'll give some general advice about what's out there already in terms of teaching handwriting. Part four, throughout the presentation, Claudia is going to give examples from the clients that we've worked with, but we also want to make sure that you end up with at least 2 or 3 enrichment activities that you can do at home or in the school environment or in your practice that can help. And finally, we will leave the channel open to answer questions at the end of the presentations. We actually got a lot of questions yesterday sent by email, and we will address these during this period as well. So, Claudie, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I like that you announced already that we are going to talk about things that maybe you are not used to talk about when it comes to handwriting. And we want, of course, start by what are the steps? What are the first things that need to happen for your child or the student to have a good handwriting? What are those milestones? Well, they are crucial, and the samples that you can see are showing something very interesting, which is in fact that we all have our personal handwriting. No one writes like anybody else. Even if we sort of learn the same way, we have followed lines after lines of alone letters, pieces of words. Still, research shows that it is impossible to perfectly imitate somebody else's writing. That's an important fact because it tells us that it's more about personality, about emotions, feelings, than about mechanics.
This slide, when I was preparing the presentation, Chloe, sorry for barging in, but I thought it was really cool how for I don't know, maybe 400 years, they've been training kids to write the same way, just practice, 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 practice. And I wondered if you had some comments about that.
We have to learn from the past. There are very good things, and certainly practice is a good part of developing handwriting, but it's certainly not sufficient. And when kids are taught and they write hundreds of times the same word, they gradually are going to insert their own personality, and sometimes they get corrected. And the teacher will say, that's not how it was on the model. Look. So yes, from the past we can learn that good things are still good things, but we know more now about the brain so that we can make it a little less boring and a little bit more personalized. I like that picture, in fact, because it could seem that this boy or girl is holding the pen wrong. But what are the steps? What has to happen for a good handwriting to develop? Obviously, fine motor. That would have come to your mind right away. It's obvious. But the other elements, such as gross motor, depending on your posture, depending how you free the elbow or the shoulder, it will be easier or more difficult. And even though it's in the middle, like not the most important, mental image is crucial. And we are going to talk about that and how to help the kids. Hand-eye coordination. There are exercises that you have in your practice, that you have at school. They don't always work for children on the spectrum or with developmental delay. Memory. You need to remember how you wrote that, how the teacher wrote it on the blackboard, how you saw it in a book. Memory is, of course, a very important element for handwriting, and spontaneous handwriting, of course. So all these neurological developments need to be in partnership. They need to happen one after the other, but also in a very harmonized manner, not one focused more than the other. For example, not only fine motor, but never forgetting mental image.
There's neurotransmitters in there, and we kind of added it at the last minute.
Right.
I wondered if you had some comments about that.
Yes, absolutely. The biochemistry of the brain, and that's really part of our job description. Two neuromédiators in particular are so important for handwriting that you don't want to neglect their function. Serotonin, which is one of the mediators that will take care of learning and will help with the control of lung muscles. That is a very important element. You want to have a very stable serotonin function. Mm-hmm. As far as dopamine, which is motor control. When we think about dopamine, we think good mood, motivation, we think memory, and this control of the entire body from the fingers to the position of the head and the fidgeting part or not. So those two elements, we want to have them in mind. For example, when the child is really getting very anxious during a practice, the best solution right there is to stop and let the child regroup, settle down, because anxiety will prevent a good serotonin function. So the handwriting will not really happen as you wish as a teacher or as a parent. Mm-hmm. And the bad thing about those wonderful neuromédiators is that if your serotonin function is not good, then it prevents the function of dopamine. So we remove anxiety as we can from the equation of learning, and we improve dopamine function either with sensory enrichment, that hopefully we're going to give you a few tips, or maintaining the child motivated by praise and by comfort, and keeping those elements in mind, knowing that, for example, children on the spectrum produce less serotonin than their peers. So they are right away at a disadvantage for fine motor control and for anxiety. So these two are very important. So there are things to happen in the right order, let's say, for everything to happen right. The different ways that the baby and the toddlers and the child is going to grab objects or reach out. That is a very important movement for fine motor. And in fact, right now, I'm working with a little girl who has Rett syndrome, which is a degenerative condition. Her brain does not really give good command to her hands. So our last, because I'm blessed to work with her in a platinum plan, so I know her really well and I can fine-tune everything for her needs. So our last set of exercises are about reaching up, which is not a natural function for her, but because she has to reach out to an object that she really wants, then there is eye-hand coordination and there is control of the hand. So reaching is part of the development of the fine motor function and part of speech and part of handwriting, of course. So if you look at a little child and the way that child is manipulating object, you can know if that child is ready or not to hold a pen and get going. So the grabbing with a whole hand, which is very common even in older kids in school, is only a step. And it is important that it happens. It's one way to hold the pen, and we can help the child move on. So we will work at picking up objects with 2 fingers, 2 pincers. We are going to work at posture, all the elements that will eventually lead to the control of the pen. So you have here 9 steps. Write them down and observe. Where is the child you are helping holding a pen and write spontaneously? We are, step 0 is the first thing that happens. It's so cute. The baby is just born, and one of the reflexes that is measured in the ACPAR is putting your finger inside the palm of the infant, and this infant is going to hold. Well, we are far from that when we talk about holding a pen. It's no longer a reflex motion. It is something organized. It is something that comes later after all the functions of grabbing and the functions of the hand have developed. And Kim, you said something very interesting about walking before talking. And the reason for that, it's of course a general picture, right? Some kids will say 2 words before they stand up. But in general, this is a situation, and this is because the freedom of the hand is essential for movement and standing up and walking. I did remember in that situation, in particular, a little boy, Victor, who lived in India and had a brain injury at birth. All he would do was lay on his back. Of course, the purpose and the goal of the parents who started to work personally with me was for him to stand up and walk. So when I explained to the parents, okay, we're first going to tell his brain that the hands are working fine and are going to help. Why? Because the brain will not allow the body to be vertical unless the hand can grab and keep him safe. So that is the relation between walking and the hand and then talking. So in the case of this little boy, we worked at telling the brain, these are the hands and we can use them. One of the first things that I did with him was to wrap his hand with a wet cloth. We're in India, it was very hot, so the wet cloth felt really cool. And then the parents would put a tiny little character from a cartoon, a little object with all kinds of shapes, and hold the hand gently closed over it. That started to give information about what the hand can feel and then can do. So we started with tactile, and then we moved on to holding and so forth until, yes, after 10 months, he was walking, holding 2 objects and things to make sure he was not falling.
Wow.
So I already have given a little bit of details about serotonin and dopamine, and that's how we work and how I work when I work with a family directly, is to evaluate, observe, to ensure that the messaging in the brain is appropriate, is functional. In the case of serotonin and dopamine, observation can be enough. When you observe a child who's always anxious, always having fits that cannot be stopped because he is very miserable, And dopamine, you have the thing that parents and teachers say, constantly on the move. Is a good description of a dopamine function that's not really doing its job. So we work at helping the brain do a better job with that. So you have here a list of all what dopamine does. And aren't we really willing to have great dopamine function for the children, but for ourselves? Note the very last piece, the attention span. This is one, of course, crucial element of handwriting. If the child cannot sit for 15 seconds, he will not be able to hold the pen and draw and then write. Serotonin seems to have more roles, and they are just as much important, and they cannot be separated. So how do these guys work? Those messenger in the brain. You can see the picture on the right-hand side that shows you the branches that reach out to other neurons, and they don't completely attach. They just come near the next little version on the neuron, and they transfer messages right there. So this is where you find serotonin and dopamine. In some cases, for example, epilepsy, I've worked with kids, something very rare called Lennox-Gastaut, where gradually the seizures are destroying those connections. They are erased. So the child loses those connections as they develop or they try to stand. So my work in those two cases that I was blessed to work with was to help the brain catch up by creating so many interesting but novel activities that the brain would keep on growing new connections. And that's the principle of neurogenesis. Mm-hmm. In our case, we talk about handwriting. So we are talking about good biochemistry that is going to lead everything else to work perfectly. So we don't ever want to forget those. Mm-hmm. So I love that picture. You may all remember, I do remember seeing some of my kids putting their foot in their mouth, so grabbing to discover what's around and what does it taste like. Maybe, probably not. It's just the fun of holding, getting really strong grip, and then doing things. So that will be the first step. And then the one I was mentioning to you, mental image.
Image. Why are you talking about mental image at this point of the developmental milestones?
Because it's there at all ages. And you may not know that your child has this constant imaging and is building from what he or she sees around. In the case of kids on the spectrum, we observe that with time, mental image does not develop right. And either, like our good friend Temple Grandin explains, her mental image is like a slideshow. When you speak to her, every word becomes an image. She does not at all think in words. That does not prevent her from writing wonderful books. But in the case of our kids, we want to ensure that there is a good mental image. One thing that parents may notice is mom gets out of the room and the child doesn't know mom is still in existence. So there is a fit, a distress. The child cannot see mom coming back.
So how do you explain, because you asked me to prepare a video to show as part of the mental image thing where this guy was shown on TV, he did a helicopter ride around over New York, and he was able to recreate by hand, redraw the cityscape. So how do you explain that?
In his case, we say he is a savant because he can do so much more than anybody else. But this is what we should be able to do, see and remember the things that we saw. In the case of Stephen Williams, who you're talking about, he has this incredible mental image of every possible detail of things he sees. And as you explained, they took him on a helicopter ride. He just glanced at the city, then came back to his studio and hand drew every building, windows, statues. So in his case, it was extremely hard when he was younger and he was nonverbal. He could not explain that he had all of that in his mind. But as soon as he was able to hold a pen, he was able to express that. So it is a demonstration of the existence of mental image and what it can lead to. And with that young man holding a pen, it became the magnificent drawings. Thankfully, his family helped him on this road.
Yeah.
But what we see, I'm not sure it's going to be a video, but I saw this incredible...
Yeah, I've got 30-second snippet from the video where we show how he's holding the pen. I think that's what you asked me to focus on.
Yes,
so
yes,
do you want to play it now, or do you want to
just
first?
play it now, because of course he is drawing from his mental image, but look at the position of the pen. Depending on his posture, he's holding the pen differently. Either the standard holding that you see here, or he holds from the tip. That does not prevent him from being the master of what he's drawing. So I love the example he is showing us, that what first starts is mental image, is the memorization of what you want to produce. And then the pen is going to be, you're going to be the master of the pen. Your memory, your mental image will guide the hand. The space in development that is essential also in handwriting is eye-hand coordination and eye. Ooh, I can't say that. Hand-eye coordination, because I have seen and I have heard teachers and parents tell me and send me samples of writing where the child, and you are going to recognize your child, many of you, is writing enormous letters or very tiny letters. They don't follow a line. And very often the child is not even looking at the paper when he is writing. So that doesn't lead to a great result. And parents are a little frustrated. They want that to improve. So hopefully just this little piece with Stephen Williams showing you that mental image start the whole gig of handwriting. But definitely we want that the head, the mind, the mental image, and the eye guide the hand.
And so all of that happened around stage 1, where they're just learning to grasp voluntarily. We're not even at stage 2 yet.
Yeah.
So I guess stage 2 happens more or less the reaching stage. Is it before or after hand-eye coordination develops?
Well, I would say that reaching comes at almost at the same time as grabbing up, like reaching out. You have to see it, and then you have to want it. And then you have to know that this thing is yours and you can use it. If you remember though, and if you still have babies, you know that around 3, the child is, oh, what is that great? Oh, I have 2. So that starts like that, and then that wonderful tool that the baby has discovered and the toddler discovers is now going to grab mom's hair if mom is nearby, or anything else that comes out. So reaching, and I mentioned this little girl I'm working with right now, is a crucial part of any fine motor activity. I mentioned very briefly that obviously gross motor is a part of handwriting. It's obvious for me because my job is to make sure that the brain is giving the right commands to the entire body. But if you notice the involvement of the entire arm in handwriting, and when you saw, for example, the artist putting one hand and then making sure that the other hand was really staying in a frame where he wanted to draw. So the entire body, the neck, the back, all of that is involved into controlling. If the child is extremely active, has difficulty containing the energy in both hands and using only one to do a specific task, you want to go back and work on that. So many activities are happening at home and at school, but rolling a ball is one of those where the child can bend down, grab, maybe throw, but that is a whole body organized motion. So definitely you want to make sure that the brain is really in charge of the entire body. I have worked with kids who were in a wheelchair initially, so we were keeping talking to the entire body when we were doing our exercises and our therapy. If I was doing an activity with the hand, and a lot of parents who work with me, and I'm happy they are here today, know that I also work with the toes, so that the brain is constantly aware that there are all these tools that can be helpful in anything that we plan to do. That is the first step where the child is reaching out on a flat surface. So the rake motion is sort of grabbing everything that can come and bring it towards him. That's where there is a will, there is eye-hand coordination, but there is now more of a project. And we see that where, and the picture is perfect for that, with self-feeding, little pieces of crackers, cereals, or little thing that the child learns now not only to pick, but also to put in his mouth.
So this stage 4 pickup with Pincer, is it when, how much time does a typical child spend developing the pincer grip when they start to use their whole hand, from raking to pincer, typically?
I would say it depends how free the parents are from the concept of mess is bad, because by 5 months old, the child is able to pick up a little piece of food and put it in his or her mouth. So it is a trajectory that goes from being laying down in the crib and gradually being able to pick up. There are some gross motor steps along the way, but around 5 months, the child is starting to pick up because he or she only wants that thing and maybe not the salad. So I was telling you, okay, we have physical needs to be able to happen for the hand-eye coordination to become an activity that is very comfortable. The child needs to be able to sit up. That is between, in the typical child, 8 months to 10 months or 6 months. Some kids are very, very active very early. That does not systematically indicate he will be able to handwrite quickly, but that is one thing that needs to happen. Balance of at least the upper body, and then I think where the next image will be two hands work, when the two hands are starting to be sort of a pair of good friends that are helping the kid end up with doing very interesting things. Here we have the little baby playing with a toy. It's great, but when they can crawl and use two hands, this is when a lot of things need to be put on higher shelves.
Yeah.
One thing that a lot of parents note in children on the spectrum or children with developmental delay is a pointing function. And some therapists try to teach the child to point. It is extremely important. It gives independence of the index and a motion that is different from the other fingers. But when you have to teach the child, you don't always get what you were hoping, because the child is going to mimic but not have a purpose. So that picture is excellent because that little boy is really pointing to something interesting that he wants his parents to share. So this is again where you see the emotion and the will of the mind that is guiding the movement.
So what's the difference between the pointing stage and the pincer grip stage? It feels to me like it's the same kind of finger
Well,
dexterity.
yes, you're right. There is a commonality, and the difference will be the intent. You pick up something for yourself. You want to put it in your mouth.
Mm.
But when you point, this is a social interaction. Kids who are alone in a room will rarely point. They will either take mom or dad by the arm and say, okay, that's what I want and I want it now. That's the expression of the face if they cannot talk. So that's the main difference. There is an emotional evolution between picking up and then pointing. Here is the demonstration that you do not walk without having hands that can do part of the job, which is keeping you either vertical or help you with the pulling up, which is also a very important function. And when I was mentioning Victor, that was the one thing that we worked on as soon as he knew, okay, there are hands here, I can manipulate toys. Okay, now I need to learn how to reach and lift myself. So the hand is the partner of walking. Okay, we're having a little review so that you don't forget anything, and I don't forget to mention
that was my slide for stage 9, finally holding a pencil.
Yeah, okay. We had only one slide. Right. After all that has happened in a natural way, then the holding of the pen evolves to become my tool to produce. So that's where sometimes the difficulty stands, where the child is not yet at that point, but the parents and the therapist or the school teacher says, okay, you're 8, you have to write your name, and the child is not yet ready for that. So reviewing the stages of development is helpful in that. Where do we have to get that?
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I just wanted to say that we're going to talk about language as part of handwriting later on in the presentation too.
Mm-hmm.
So part 2.
Okay, why are we still focused on handwriting? And the question that we asked ourselves here with Kim is, okay, what happens if we stop handwriting? What are we going to miss? What is going to go out of our existence? And we had 2 ideas that would you want the surgeon to have a poor handwriting, not be able to sign his name on between 2 fine lines? Or we also have the example of the dentist. Do you want the dentist to not be able to control his movement when he is holding that thing that hurts so bad? Right. Not saying that dentist and surgeon have a legible handwriting, but they do control their hands perfectly, and they have beautiful handwriting when they write their reports, if they are still writing their reports. So we need fine motor and we need handwriting, even if we're not a surgeon.
Now, the next slide I have is a picture of something you made. Do you want to introduce it, or should I just show it?
Maybe not all the people who are in this room with us today know that I'm legally blind. So I should be having a hobby that is a very large, or like sports. Well, I decided to have as a hobby creating miniature food for doll houses. I believe I have quite a good dexterity. My fingers are obeying my brain. I do have a mental image, and my fingers do. And then I can show you one of my tools. I need a very professional magnifier to check what did I do. Oh yeah, it is an apple. So yeah, it's one of the most, these books hold barely in the palm of the hand. I just love doing those things because it's very relaxing, and we will mention that later. Handwriting is a control of your mind, and having an activity in your life where you use your fine motor is an enrichment of your life. We can talk about the things that we are no longer doing. Who is still making their own bread instead of buying the one in a plastic bag that never rots? That's something that shocked me when we came from France, and people said, no, the brain does not turn bad. Ah, that's frightening. It should.
You mean the bread? You said
Yeah,
the
the
brain doesn't
bread.
turn bad.
Oh, yeah. Hmm. So all these abilities disappear from our environment and from our lives. And that gradually reduce the ability of our brain to tolerate, to be able to endure some of the things of life, because we are so narrow in how we work or how we think. And one of the things that was mentioned in a study is that we barely have a mental image when we type, simply because very often we don't type things that are funny or pleasant to look at, if it's an annual report, but it doesn't tell a story for our imagination and our emotions. So gradually we become more automatic and more distanced from maybe our own selves.
And you sent me a couple of studies, and there are a couple of quotes from that studies I thought were really powerful to describe
Yeah.
the benefits of handwriting. The one that struck me, I mean, obviously sharpening the brain and helping with learning, because when you write, a lot of the same regions involved in learning are involved in writing. But the part where it says it forces you to slow down, and it increases the same type of neural activity that happens during meditation, that to me was something I didn't expect.
Yeah. And it's maybe because we tend to forget that handwriting is not something mechanical and something that we just scribble on a note. Yes, it makes you think about, okay, if you're who writes letters anymore, but some of us still do, and we should. And we should be drawing or we should be handwriting simply because of those wonderful powers that develop in our brain when we're doing that.
Okay. Part 3.
Okay, what shouldn't we do when we are teaching our kids how to write? Well, I mentioned serotonin at the very start. We cannot cause stress in the child. When does stress raise and grow to become something like this picture that the child is overwhelmed? It could be because the child does not know why you want him to hold the pen, and maybe does not have the words. And he's not verbal enough to see those words in his mind and put them on the paper. So again, I would recommend, let's go back to where is that child in his development, and let's work from that on instead of maybe jumping too fast into the pen holding. So no stress.
Yes. And of the questions that we received over the last couple of days, there were a few of them around letter reversal, B and D. And when we were preparing for the webinar, I said, oh, this would be a good time to talk about this. Do you have some comments, or do you want to keep it for the Q&A?
In fact, until your child is writing spontaneously something that he wants or she wants to write, would it be about a little story? Would it be the name of a good friend? Handwriting is still drawing. So when you draw either the letter D or the letter B, why would they be one way or another? There is no logic. And we had a webinar on learning how to read and the importance of letters. Let's go back to that, to the fact that we decide the direction of the letters and we cannot tell the kid why. And smart kids get resistant. Sometimes, well, if they cannot tell me, then it does not exist. I have one tip here that I want to share with one of the moms that was really worried about it. And I'll share it with all of you, and I hope some of you can use it. And it is to give identity to the letters. Start with only the capital letters. Work on those and give them all a face or a hat. I do feel like the B is like a big snowman, or give them a meaning before your child is able to memorize the words and understand why this little arbitrary sign means this sound and this piece of word. Then make them alive, make them fun, make them out of Play-Doh, make them, and we had that also with feeding, use peas or corn to draw letters so that it becomes something that's part of the child's life and child's mind. The
So this
direction
is the idea of anchoring, right? Anchoring abstract concepts. So you're saying that B and D are two abstract concepts that need to be anchored in something that means something to the kid, and then they'll be able to remember it. Is it like, it reminds me of, for the longest time, I couldn't remember if J was je or J was g, because in French, in the alphabet is G and then G, H, I, J, that's in French, and in English it's G, H, I, J. So I was always confused the J with the G in English, and then I found myself reversing in French. Is this the same idea, or is it two different parts of the brain?
No, it is the same idea. It took you a while to give each sound an identity, and then you were able to read, and all those letters gathered together and made a pretty sound. And then you have to restart all over because there's not one reason on earth why G in English is J in French. So kids who are bilingual, and I have a little boy who can speak 4 languages and only writes one, mind you, but he writes Arabic, and at school they write English. The transition is even more difficult for him than it was for you in 2 different languages also. So going back into the shoes of the kid and seeing things as he sees them in his mental image, in his imagination, will be very helpful. So giving identity, anchoring the sounds and the shapes of letters to something that means something to the child is going to help a lot. Okay, when can we help? When can we put our hand on top of the hand of the child? The first day. Because the first day, the child really is not sure about what exactly you want, and then you move out. There is something that has happened to several children I worked with in the past. I worked with a little girl in Montreal that had an issue where she was barely touching the paper. She knew how to write, and she could write properly every time mom had her hand on top. So we worked very slowly at erasing the need. Because what has happened with way too many weeks and months of weight of the hand on top of that hand created a need for the brain. The brain did not know how to press. And it's very interesting to note that the same problem I find in a little, it's a little boy who is in New Delhi, a little girl in Australia. they have all the same problem. They need the weight of a hand, or to some just maybe the touch. And some parents tell me I only need to touch the forearm. That is still replacing a natural function by something the brain learns really quickly. Mm-hmm. And so hand over hand, day one. Again, because it's complicated for the child to figure out what we exactly want him to do, business operators have created tools. Not saying those don't work. They work fabulously. One issue, and I will compare that to, I got run over when I was in Tahiti by a concrete truck, and I had 11 broken bones. So I had cast a little bit everywhere. So I know that as soon as you remove a cast, your brain has no idea that, oh, that's a leg, you can lean on it. And the very first time I tried to stand up, I was on the floor faster than I tried because my brain had forgotten. It takes 3 days for the brain to remove its commands of the muscles when they are in a cast, or like here, it's a little bit of a casting situation where the piece of plastic is doing the handwriting. The kid is not. And when you remove the fingers and you give the pen again, the child is unable and physically unable because the contraction of the muscles is gone. So you have to work at it again. Why does the brain forget? It's really because our brain wants to save energy and be efficient. If we don't need muscle control on the hand when writing, the brain is going to use the energy somewhere else. So I would not at all use this kind of objects, even if they are very helpful on the moment, because they don't have a long-lasting benefit. To the contrary, they will cause difficulty bigger than before.
I mean, it's easy for us to say that because we have a method of, developing the neural connections and getting the parts of the brain that control the strength of the fingers, and we know how to grow all of that. But if you're in a situation where you've worked and you haven't been able to apply from what you knew, and the kid still needs to write, and that tool exists to sort of to replace the missing skills, I can see why this is useful. Absolutely. I guess what we're saying is it's better. I mean, everybody agrees that it's better for the brain to learn by itself to do certain things. We can get the brain to learn to do it, and so it's easy for us to say it's okay, don't use that.
And I believe we're going to show a few of the activities that we use to help the children learn how to use all the fingers. And for sure, like a therapist who sees the child for half hour a week, that's not enough unless there are exercises that will be transported to home and parents will do it. The part of language is, of course, an enormous part of handwriting, and you will have major difficulty to see a child develop spontaneous handwriting with horrible spelling, but at least he writes what he feels and sees in his mind. If that child does not understand what you're saying, because nonverbal kids are able to handwrite because they have the language in their mind, but we cannot disconnect the ability to understand and obviously also the ability to speak and the ability to handwrite. So that is a huge part of it.
Here's the big question. What if they're nonverbal?
I very often discover that the nonverbal child understands everything. And I want to talk again about this little girl with Rett syndrome. She's not verbal. She has maybe 3 words. And if you don't know, Rett is going to cause degeneration of the control of the mouth, the breathing, the feeding, and of course the control of the hands. One of the typical thing that kids with Rett will do is put their hand in their mouth, sometimes bite their hand, and parents usually put cast on the hands. And I have always felt that she is very smart and can understand. And quite recently, because we work on language in the same way we would if she was completely verbal, and now if her mom says, hands out of the mouth, she does it. She understands. She is very, very smart. And the majority of children are smart and will understand, assume they do.
So what you're saying is receptive language is enough to anchor the meaning of words and letters and then assist in the development of handwriting?
Yes, because there will be a will. There will be a mental image in the brain of this child. He will remember the words. So if we help this child, and of course there are massive exceptions, and we have to take them into consideration. But the majority of children, even nonverbal, love to be spoken to. And guess what? This is something that I have parents do with every child, which is to read to them, and not read with pictures, but read text.
Mm-hmm.
And so far, I haven't had one kid, and most of them were nonverbal when we start, asking the parent to stop in the way they can or showing they're not interested. And parents are surprised by the attention. And I even have a little boy we started working with only 2 months ago who goes, uh-huh, when mom is reading, and he doesn't talk. So that is where I hope I can transfer to you the will to have more words about this nonverbal kid, either by reading or by conversing, even if there is no reply right away, and making language something wonderful for the child.
We've got 2 webinars on speech development.
Right. So draw. You start with that. You start with pure creation, and using fingerprint is a very good start because you are going to use most fingers dependently. Either you're going to put the hand, as you can see here, then you put 2 fingers, and then you're going to be making dots. So again, you develop in the child the desire to create. Kids love colors. They will put their 2 hands in there, and they will create beautiful or not things that you will put on the fridge no matter what. That's the first step. The will to do and the creative part, that is a huge element in handwriting.
All right. So now some sensory enrichment therapy exercises that you've given me, that you've used in the past with some clients while you were trying to develop brain functions involved in handwriting. I thought we could show off a little bit some before and after handwriting sheets. Do you see enough to describe? I mean, I think some of it, most of it is self-explanatory. You've got one kid at the top, we got another kid in the bottom. I think it was a year with, it was longer. It was a longer time frame between the before and after with the bottom picture, and then the top.
Yeah. So the top is showing us probably no looking at the page, not really knowing why there are lines on this page and do they mean anything. Also, it shows us one specificity in autism in particular, where the child has much more ability to see everything than you and I. That means that lines may be too many, too much info when the child is starting to handwrite. So initially, I do it because somebody, an adult, has asked me, then I write because I want to express something. And I am in charge of what I am putting on that line.
Mm-hmm.
So I do because, and I want, and I remember the words, I can hear them in my mind. These are the elements that have developed with time in those children.
Okay, so the first enrichment activity you recommended was a pure sensory pairing to help with neurotransmitter regulation.
Mm-hmm. Soft touch improves production of serotonin in the brain. So that's something that you can do in the classroom, in therapy. You can do either a soft hand massage or what we have on every worksheet, whoever the child is, which we call the gentle claw, which is in fact random circles on the back of the child, and that soft stimulation of the outer layer of the skin will lead the brain to produce more. So with a very anxious child, this is going to help. If you add smelling to that, you are prompting the brain to produce more dopamine. Dopamine, movement, control, motivation, memory, they really go together. So having a nice scent by the child's nose, either doing a gentle soft touch of the arm, of the back. Most of the kids are hypersensitive in their back. They need practice, but eventually they all enjoy it and they will all settle down and calm down. So that's your recipe before therapy or before lesson. Let's do some soft touch and smelling and then be ready to learn. So we also have exercises that teach the brain, okay, this is where the fingers are and this is how they feel when we do something and this is what they can do. This exercise is so powerful and seems so simple. You can observe the kid is holding coins with two pincers with each hand. So that is activity of the two sides of the brain at the same time. So that's already something powerful to help with what is called the corpus callosum, the bridge between the two sides of the brain. Then the kid is picking up without looking and is acting, behaving, doing the fine motor activity, looking at his reflection in the mirror. This is developing this eye-hand control we talk about in a much more powerful way than if you are looking at your hand and you're producing without having a reversed image. That kid is doing pretty good, but you see a little bit of hesitation because his brain sees the hole in the piggy bank in a different space and different spot.
Yeah,
So
and this is a child actor who is neurotypical. So obviously, if you have a kid on the spectrum, it's going to look a lot different. Do you have some frequently asked questions from parents who said, who challenged, said, "Hey, this is too difficult. My kid's never going to do this"?
Yes. Every time parents feel that an exercise is too difficult, they forget that the main principle of neurogenesis, the change of the brain, is trying. The simple fact that the child even starts to try to pick the coins, that could stop here. The activity could stop here because this is already extremely difficult. So you would progress very slowly, and then when the child is able to hold, then you want the child to look at himself in the mirror, which is also quite a difficult stage, but it happens over a few days. Then trying to put the coins inside the piggy bank. Trying is what makes the brain grow. I usually tell the parents when they say, oh, it's too hard, I answer, well, if it was easy, we would take off this exercise and give a different one. If it's easy, it means the brain already has the tools. We are not going to grow any.
In the Q&A box, if anybody's asking questions about this particular game, I'm going to ask Rachel, who's been monitoring. Okay, let's look at the other one.
Right. That one is also fun for the children as soon as they know, okay, we're not putting the Play-Doh in our mouth and we're not going to pull it out of the box. Poking, that is a movement that is not a natural movement in life. We are never poking holes one finger at a time, independently of the other fingers. Doing one hand then the other builds up this ability of the brain to command both sides, which ends up by giving the dominant side even more abilities. So we are poking little holes inside the Play-Doh with that kind of posture is developing independence and strength in the fingers. Remember the pen holding and the energy to press, that can be developed. As soon as the kid has done every finger, then we are asking to hold the toothpick with only 2 fingers and plant them vertically. We alternate hands and we are going slowly. Again, like Kim said, this is a child actor and he was very able to sit down and follow the instructions. However, even very calm and typical kids are not able to do that exercise. It does take either a pianist or somebody who types really fast on the keyboard, but once you are able to improve that fine motor ability, you have developed specific connections between the brain and the hand that are very important for handwriting. Okay. And after all, it's a game. The children think we're playing. In fact, we're working.
All right, let me see if we've got some questions about this particular game.
Mm-hmm.
No, it looks like we're all good. Although we are over time, so maybe a lot of our parents have left already.
Right. So the last one, before we do a few questions, is looking for a tiny object in 2 very different elements, ice and corn. Corn feels warm. Obviously, ice feels as it is. And doing fine motor activity in those very different texture and temperature is creating, again, connections between the brain and the hands and the fingers. So that is another exercise that we would do to help the child handwrite.
Awesome. Okay, I'm going to see if I can. No, I cannot stop sharing my screen.
Well, that's a nice picture of my son, Killian.
All right, let me go through some of the questions that were sent to us during the presentation. Okay. Tips for the development of hand dominance. I'm not sure what this means. It sounds almost like if we can train a kid to be left-handed or right-handed. Do you think this is what they meant?
It feels like it, so there's no answer because we are not changing how the brain is wired. Being lefty or right-handed means much more than using one hand. And in fact, I use the left hand for my math, but I am definitely a right-handed person. So next question.
Next question. How do you, sorry, give me 1 second. I can't see the whole thing. How do you implement cursive writing for a 13-year-old who learned cursive late and refuses to use it and gets frustrated by it easily? Oh, we got that question by email a couple of days ago. I was going to read that one. Anyway, how important is it to have your child be adept at this from a developmental standpoint? I think its mom is like, okay, is it okay to give up because he's 13, he's, how important is it?
Mom also says he could do it. And what has happened between he could do it and he refuses to do it, you want to put your investigator hat and find out. Because why would he refuse when he can? So there is here something that you can probably solve. And if you are not able to solve this problem, then you can give up cursive and keep the standard handwriting that in fact is very convenient and has the same benefit as any type of handwriting.
I guess a question we did not address in this presentation is how good is good? I mean, we all know of somebody who's got the perfect handwriting, but I'm wondering if those guys don't maybe even have a problem because they're focusing so hard on having each letter perfect that they're, you know, like the attention to detail, but seem to not seeing the forest for the trees, right? So so is there,
Well,
how good is good?
good enough is anybody you want to be able to read it can read it. So it could be too large for anybody's taste, or you could scratch out some words. If the message goes through, it's well enough, it's good enough. But some people will always want to do something perfect. Why not? I see that as if it's only focused on the handwriting, it's just somebody who's going to do a lot of meditation by taking a lot of time handwriting.
Here's a question. What's the current research on hand dominance? I don't think we did some research on that. This person is saying that it seems hand dominance is decreasing, especially with touchscreen use. The impact seems to affect organization in general for completing left to right reading, worksheet format. What is the current research showing? Will the importance of intervention for hand dominance issues lessen as technology increases?
Well, the answer is going to be a little bit of a repeat of the previous question about dominance. Your brain commands the right side and the left side in a particular way because you are particular. And it is not only about handwriting. You are right that screen use is sort of dissolving. But if you observe really a group of children, they are going to tap the screen with their one particular hand, whichever that one is. So you want to encourage sports activity, you want to teach your child to cook, you want to encourage crafts so that the real dominance remains, is not sort of swallowed up because the child is only using the screen. That would be a very sad thing. We cannot really teach dominance. It's there, and that's why the word is dominance, right? It's there, and we can't change it. So as far as more research, I always recommend to go on PubMed and put your keyword and see, because it changes basically every day. So there may be new studies on the topic.
Here's a good one. At what age do you stop correcting pencil grasp? I've seen many kiddos past third grade with funky pencil grasps, and they're hard to correct once they're past elementary age.
It all depends again about the legibility. We saw Stephen Williams holding the pen in a very different manner depending on his posture or what he is doing. So if this kid is holding the pen in a very weird manner, but is able to write things that people can read, maybe you don't need to worry too much about it. If you can see that it is a handicap, that his handwriting is really lousy and moving on needs changing, it's never too late. I sometimes have people call me and ask if it's too late to start sensory enrichment therapy. And my next question is the person breathing? Then it's not too late. The brain can change at any age of life.
Here's a question from a teacher. The biggest challenge that I face is carrying over the handwriting skills taught in therapy into the classroom. I have a difficult time with this. Kids do well during therapy, but then continue to struggle in the classroom. I really think it is a transition to a larger group environment, but any tips would be appreciated.
You're right. You are absolutely right that going from a caring therapist sitting in a quiet room where the child can be really free to think and to focus and to apply is sort of taken out when there is so much noise and so many more kids. So it will take time, but if the child is able in therapy, that means he is able. So you may want to maybe also allow the kid to go and practice for 5 minutes in a little corner that's quieter in the classroom, so that he can transition and realize that he can do in both settings. But it takes patience and time for that to happen.
I'm reading through the questions. There's lots of questions. Do you have any tips for left-handed writers?
Yes. A tip for the parents and the teacher: do not put the example on the left side. I had this issue. 2 of my kids are left-handed, and Ken, to not name him, was taught with the model, the A, the letter, on the left side. So he had to curve his arm above so that he could still see the letter as he was writing, and he was also wiping the ink as he was writing.
Yeah.
Left-handed, special person, special treatment. Just put the letter on the other side and allow the kid to use a pencil that is not going to splatter all over. That would be the only recommendation.
Do you have tips when the child is writing very slow?
Well, it depends what you call very slow. I would probably work the same recommendation I gave earlier for a different issue, which is practice other things than just handwriting. Practice other activities that require hand activity, fine motor, like the examples we gave you, so that the child is more comfortable. Check the posture. Is the child getting tired by holding a poor position, getting a neck ache, or there can be all kinds of good reasons, and so you want to solve them, and maybe that child is going to take always a little bit more time, which is not particularly a problem in a classroom. We just know, okay, this kid is not going to finish the dictation at the same rate, but really practice hand activity in an other setting than just handwriting.
My child Daniel is now 15 and has Down syndrome and autism. He has very immature hand reflexes, still chews on jump ropes, sometimes electronic cords and toys for hours every day. Very poor control over his hands. Fine hand motor skills are extremely challenging for him. How can I help him?
Well, the first issue in children or adolescents or adults with Down syndrome is a very low production of serotonin. So if you want to make a big difference with hand coordination, hand-eye coordination, fine and gross motor, you want to work on the serotonin level, the brain serotonin level of this child. I worked a long time ago personally with a little girl with Down syndrome, and we worked for about 1.5 years. She was able to catch up with all the steps of development and learning. And in fact, she was part of a group of 3 little girls I worked with at the time. And there is a reputation that is placed on children with Down syndrome, which is completely irrational and unreasonable, that they have difficulty learning. Learning happens with what happens in the brain, and mainly serotonin and dopamine. As soon as we worked with those girls, the 3 girls, on helping with those, plus, of course, the other therapeutic exercises we were doing, they caught up with the other kids of their age. And that little girl, I have videos of her handwriting beautifully at the age of 3. May I talk about the RQ test, Kim? Is that appropriate at this moment?
Sure, yes. One thing I'd like to say is, it's 2:15. I'm very grateful that all you guys stayed around. Sorry. No offense if you leave. We're still recording, and we'll send the recording to everybody soon. So go ahead, Claudia.
Yeah, so those girls arrived at the age of starting school, so all of them in the different part of the city were given an IQ test to figure out where those girls needed the most help. and it happened that the three of them were found to be exceptionally gifted. That is a wonderful event, which just is showing to me that it doesn't matter how you are born with a difficulty. We can solve the difficulty, we can work on it, and have a kid with Down syndrome develop fabulously well without any issue. Let's think about what is causing the issue and work at solving it.
A very good question from the Q&A box that I just lost. Oh, here it is. Does a diagnosis of dysgraphia indicate the child missed the developmental steps, or is there more involved?
That's a very complicated word that really tells us either the kid has difficulty with directions of the letters or all kinds of things around handwriting. Yes, it's a complicated word, but the answer for the problem can be more simple than it looks. And I would certainly encourage parents and therapists who have a kid with that kind of diagnosis to go and observe, where is this child in the development of the hand, in gross motor and fine motor, and maybe work from there and in order to move where age-appropriate capacities are developed.
I'm going through all the questions we got by email. I would like to know how to help my 3-year-old transform from writing with a grab hold on a pencil to the usual pinch grip. I think we've addressed that. She says she's getting too comfortable with the grab grip, and I'm getting worried it will be harder to stop in future. I think we've addressed that.
Yeah.
But here's one. Yeah. Is the window open for teenagers to develop good writing skills?
Is it what?
The window still open.
Oh, again, there's not a time in life where we cannot develop a capacity. Our brain is malleable. If we do what's needed, the brain will grow new abilities, new connections. It's just a matter of focusing on it. What is the problem? And let's solve it.
Okay, I think that's all. There's a lot of questions that were more or less the same, so I skipped those. So yeah, I think that's it for Q&A. Thank you very much, everybody, for attending. Contact us if you'd like us to work with you and help with handwriting. And till next week. Next month, our webinar will be on helping with the anxiety of transitioning from the home environment where most of the schooling has been happening with the pandemic and being back into the school environment. So, have a good rest of your day, everybody. Have a blessed day, and we'll talk very soon.
Okay. Bye.